Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, May 17th, 5:26 a.m. Central Time. Grain markets are higher this morning. Matt Bennett is here. Guys, let's start out with the drought monitor.
So, a large portion of the U.S. Corn Belt received rainfall last week. Drought conditions improved in western and southern Illinois, northern and southern Missouri, and western and southeast Kentucky. Conditions also improved in the central and southern portions of Iowa. The High Plains saw variable weather last week. Precipitation across southeast Kansas and northeast Oklahoma caused drought conditions to improve. Meanwhile, a lack of precipitation in southwest Nebraska and central Kansas caused conditions to worsen. So when we look at the percentage of U.S. areas experiencing drought, corn country 12%, soybeans 9%, winter wheat 25%, spring wheat 14%, and cattle country 14%.
Drought is obviously no longer the concern here. The concern is that we're too wet. There are delays. Here's the last 7 days of precipitation, estimated at least. Saw a lot of rain in southern Iowa, Missouri, parts of Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska. A lot of places were wet. This is just the last 3 days. These are areas that, probably need some more time to dry out. Your central Indiana, that spot on the Illinois-Missouri border. Matt, what's your take on the lack of drought, planting progress, all of that?
As we talked about before over the winter, a couple of these, weather guys, and I don't want their job anymore, and I want my own sometimes. But we're talking major drought in the West. That to me, if you had a flash type drought, you've changed the scope.
This is what they think may happen this summer.
Right.
Okay.
You change the scope of that discussion somewhat now that you actually have some subsoil moisture, which typically precipitates a chance for rain to actually occur a little more frequently. I mean, when you get super dry, no moisture in the topsoil, it's just really hard to get rain. But I think you've got a better opportunity that some of these folks can withstand it, maybe catch a timely rain or two. The thing about this wet weather, I just had a message on our Teams chat, from one of our folks in Iowa, and said, hey, I think in our particular area, folks are going to be able to go. And the next thing that they said is something I continue to hear. Conditions aren't going to be perfect, but we're going to be able to go. And that's something you and I talked about the other day. And I don't think it's necessarily that this crop's going in the ground late. That is definitely a concern. It's just that I think whenever you push it, and agronomically speaking, you don't go in ideal conditions, you start to dial back your yield potential. So it's probably something that needs to be discussed at some point, especially if we have to continue to mud in, the last 30-40% of this crop.
Now, looking at the forecast, it's still the trend, and these maps change around every day, multiple times per day. But the trend here, the way that it looks broadly speaking, is that you're going to be drier here for another 2 or 3 days. This is the next 72 hours of expected precipitation. And then you got to the next 5 days, and there's a lot of rain coming back in for Iowa, for Minnesota, for Wisconsin, for Nebraska. It actually looks like during the next 3 days, Illinois, Iowa are going to be fairly dry. And even where you're at, Matt, looks like you guys may be dry for another 5 days at least. But the rains are coming back early next week.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing I think that's concerning for me as a producer. If I go in there and I work ground that may be a little bit wet, plant it a little bit wet, to try to beat the rain, and then I get rain on top of it, that's a very poor combination of circumstances. Typically, emergence is a major issue. So I sure hope that the folks that are forecasted to get that rain don't get near as much as what they're forecasted to get on the heels of planting. I wish them well because, in our area, there's a lot of folks that haven't even started, but then there's folks that are close to done. You got everything in between, but it's definitely, usually, Joe, in central Illinois, by this time, everyone's going to the lake on the weekend because, everybody's done planting and it's not the case this year. It's been a little more stressful this spring, but hey, it is what it is. You deal the hand that Mother Nature gives you.
The corn market sold off yesterday. Is it because traders believe a lot of corn is being planted right now and will be the next couple of days, or is that not the case?
I think it's this window for sure. I really feel strongly that they're taking a look. I mean, you look at not only the markets moving lower, you're seeing spreads weaken. I just kind of look at this, and I do feel like some of these funds are saying, we liquidated a fair amount of shorts. Maybe we want to be short, into an environment where it's probably going to be like a $2 billion back-to-back years on marketing years for stocks. I just don't think that they're going to lift 100% of their shorts. I mean, who knows? The commitment of traders last week was a bit of a surprise.
Yep.
Maybe it will be again this week. Maybe they get close to even, but I don't think if they get close to even, and let's say Monday you end up at 70% or above, I just don't see a major story here.
If
It's
that's the case,
frustrating.
if that's the case, and you hit 70 on Monday, your planting delay story's over, and now you're going to be onto your June, July weather story.
And I
I would
don't know
think.
that you hit 70. I just think that last week, for instance, Joe, right here last week, there's a lot of planting that got done. I
Yeah.
mean, like it or not, we went on Mother's Day. I mean, I didn't want to plant on Mother's Day. What are you going to do? You got 4 out of 7 days of rainfall. But the bottom line is that in a matter of 24 or 48 hours, these regions can plant 60% of their crop in some places. Guys running 24 row high speed planters can get a ton of work done. I don't know that you get to 70%, but I do think it could be a bit of a surprise what the number is next Monday to the high side.
Let's jump to export sales.
So, U.S. corn and soybean export sales were disappointing last week. Net corn sales were reported at 29 million bushels, down 17% from the previous week and down 14% from the prior 4-week average. Mexico was the largest corn buyer for the week. Net soybean sales fell below pre-report estimates at 10 million bushels. The print was down 38% from the previous week and down 31% from the prior 4-week average. Egypt was the largest buyer for the week. Net wheat sales were reported at 3 million bushels, up 91% from the previous week and up substantially from the prior 4-week average. Mexico was the largest wheat buyer for the week.
Matt, there are some problems with our pace of new crop export sales. Here's new crop soybean sales, worst total commitments since 2005. And a big part of that is the fact that China has bought 0 corn and 0 soybeans for the next marketing year. Maybe there's some unknown sales that are actually China, but China has a big 0 in front of them. And I mean, you look at soybeans, especially corn's kind of a mixed bag, but in soybeans, I mean, they would almost always have a substantial amount of beans on the books for the next marketing year by this time, barring your trade war years. And if you guys are looking at this graphic, I know it's hard to read, but like the 4-year ago, 5-year ago, that's trade war territory. And that's why those numbers are low, but we should be anywhere between 1 million and could be 7 or 8 million metric tons. And we have a big fat 0. China has bought anything.
I know it's a bit of an issue to say the least. It's concerning. Some people think that it could be politically motivated. China has a reason for their purchasing program. They always do. They've been pretty savvy as far as that's gone. I guess as I look at this, my concern, and I think that whenever you looked at that report last Friday, you had to look at that new crop balance sheet as far as world stocks go. And, USDA is projecting like 128, and which would be pretty massive whenever we've been, kind of fluttering around this 100 million ball game. And so if you've got a 128 global, the U.S. may continue just to see their export book continue to dwindle, and I don't know. You've got to hope in that case, that maybe some of the sputtering that we're seeing as far as this renewable diesel build out, if you will, in the crush industry, maybe we kind of catch hold and that thing takes off again. And I do think there's a lot of question marks there, but we need to be using a lot of beans domestically, given what I'm seeing as far as this export situation goes.
Here's a couple stats for you on exports. So USDA projects that new crop soybean exports out of the United States are going to increase by 7.5% next year versus this current year. And given what we know right now, snowball's chance in hell of that happening. The other issue is USDA has Chinese soybean imports, new crop projected at 109 million. And the Chinese government came out, I think, last week and said it was going to be sub 100. It was like 96 or 97. And I know China's full of shit when they talk about things like that, but there's some issues here. Absolutely. And China is like them or not. I mean, they've historically always been our biggest soybean buyer. If they're not around, we've got big problems.
Absolutely.
The Kansas Wheat Tour is projecting the highest wheat yield since 2021. Crop scouts on the annual tour are estimating the Kansas wheat yield to reach 46.5 bushels per acre. The estimate is above the 5-year crop tour average of 42.4 bushels per acre. Crop scouts are also forecasting total production in the state at 290.4 million bushels. The estimates are significantly higher than the USDA's forecast of 38 bushels per acre and 267.9 million bushels. The tour's increased estimates are attributed to an improvement in precipitation compared to previous years.
When I looked at the drought monitor, Kansas still looked pretty droughty to me. But in any case, they're calling for this bigger crop, which is above the 5-year average. It's bigger than USDA's estimate. Kansas is your biggest producer of winter wheat in the United States. Matt, thoughts on the wheat market? Is this still a Russia story? I don't think it's a U.S. story, the rally.
No, I mean, I got to think it's still got, a hint of the Russian story. Obviously, if Russia ends up with bigger losses than what they're letting on, which I think most people feel like that's probably the case, if that's the case, then certainly it's going to impact the world export market whenever it comes to wheat. I mean, typically they're your number one wheat exporter, so. Yeah, I think that it's got more to do with that. I mean, and the thing is, I do believe we've talked about this more than once, Joe. Sometimes the wheat market can kind of be the leader and get everyone woke up, so to speak. And, I don't want to go off course here, but I don't think without the wheat market being as strong as what it's been here lately, especially since Friday, I think the bean market would have actually absolutely fell apart if it didn't have some sympathy, from wheat and corn that spilled over. And so if wheat can continue with a bit of strength, I think that it spells at least supportive times, for corn and beans, and especially beans in a time when beans probably should be moving lower.
Yeah. All right. We've got more Argentina problems.
The Buenos Aires Grains Exchange trimmed its soybean forecast on Thursday. The exchange is estimating Argentina's soybean crop at 50.5 million metric tons. The estimate is down from the previous forecast of 51 million metric tons. The reduction is due to the hot and dry weather in March, which impacted the northern region of the country. The USDA is projecting the Argentine soybean crop at 50 million metric tons.
They also mentioned that they may cut again the crop estimates because there's going to be a frost at some point here during the next couple of weeks. The market doesn't seem to really care about this. I don't feel like the market's been trading South America. I think we traded the Brazil flooding thing for a week or so, but we need to see some better demand is what we need to see.
No, absolutely. I think when you're looking at Argentina at 50 million tons, and then you look over at Brazil and the size they're talking, which is essentially 3 times that. Unfortunately, for the Argentine news agency or Rosario, people just don't pay attention to it as much. Now, if they would have said, "Hey, we've got a 10 million metric ton drop," I think, or something north of 5, there's no doubt in my mind that you would see some eyebrows raised. But yeah, I just don't think the market's that excited about it.
Stock market's been on fire.
It sure has. The Dow Jones reached a historical level on Thursday as it surged past the 40,000 mark before finishing the day slightly lower. Economic data indicating that the Fed may begin cutting rates in September has fueled the stock market this week. Impressive earnings reports have also supported equities. Experts believe robust earnings, the possibility of lower interest rates, and a resilient consumer could cause stocks to climb even higher. However, 3 Fed officials reiterated on Thursday that rates will remain elevated until the Fed receives more evidence that inflation is easing.
This stat was floating around. It took only 872 sessions for the Dow to rally 10,000 points. I watch the stock market pretty closely because I have the majority of every dollar I've ever made in the stock market. But a lot of this, Matt, feels to me as if it feels to me like it's not an economy story and it's actually a currency devaluation story. And that's just how I feel about it, given the ebbs and flows of the market. Like the currency continues to be devalued, and for that reason, stocks can rally.
Yeah,
they're priced in dollars.
And one of the things Kesey said,
there's some good earnings and stuff too, but I mean, that's just what it feels like to me.
Well, a resilient consumer continues to massively pile up debt on their credit cards. I mean, what could go wrong there? So yeah, I do think that people have spent their way into being a slave to debt, and I think that this
What else is new
economy,
though? I mean, that's always been the case.
I just feel like it's gotten out of hand in the last. I mean, it's always been rough. I agree, but whenever you're a record, I just think that it's a big problem. So, I don't know. Hopefully, they do start cutting rates. I'll believe when I see it, though.
Well, if they cut rates, then that means more inflation. People are talking stagflation. I don't know. There's a lot of. I think this is going to be a crazy year before it's all said and done. What did cattle do yesterday?
They were higher once again. Feeders were an average of $1.40 higher. Live cattle ended the day an average of 64 cents higher. Box beef had another impressive day. Choice box beef rose to its highest level since March 26th to close at 310.15. That was up 338 on the day, and select ended the day at 296.51. That was up 220.
Are you a cattle bull again, Matt?
I don't know if I'm a
Game
bull
on.
again. Here's the thing: you get, like I've said before, put 2 or 3 or 4 cattle on feed reports together that are what I think they will be, and I do think that some people will get into a buying frenzy again.
Yeah.
But if they do, a cattle producer, in my opinion, has to understand what's happened in the last several months. That this thing can turn very rapidly, and I'd be selling into that thing as good as I could.
Outside market's pretty quiet on Friday. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. We will talk to you on Monday morning.